use a pointer to do it. Okay. Alright, we're going to talk about change in the price level, inflation, and how it affects exchange rates. My name's Claire.
I'm Emmy. I'm Sophia.
I'm Chris.
Alright, so we're going to start off with just a review of inflation and deflation. So inflation is when an economy's price level is rising, and deflation is when an economy's price level is falling. And together, these values explain how exchange rates adjust to monetary disturbances. And next, we'll look at price level compared to exchange rate. So a country's price level doesn't jump immediately like its exchange rate does. The exchange rate, which you can see in red, changes drastically compared to the price level in blue, which remain relatively more or less constant. This is in part because many prices are written into long-term contracts and therefore can't be changed immediately to keep up with the fluctuating exchange rate. The most influential of these is workers' wages, which makes up a large fraction of the cost of producing goods and services. Wages make up a large portion of production costs, and output prices are heavily dependent upon production costs. So the overall price level behavior is influenced by the sluggishness of wage movements. So a change in the money supply leads to an immediate demand and cost pressures, which leads to an eventual future increase in price levels. These demand and cost pressures come from three sources. The first is excess demand for output and labor. An increase in money supply leads to an increase in total demand for goods and services. So to meet this demand, corporations must hire more workers or employ their workers overtime. These workers want higher wages, and producers are generally willing to give it to them, because in a booming economy, they can expect to raise their prices, thereby creating an expansionary effect. So more money means that people are buying more goods, which means that they need to supply more for that demand and hire more workers for that. And then they're able to pay those workers higher wages because they're getting more money in. So it's a positive cycle. Second is inflationary expectations, which is if everyone expects the price level to rise in the future, it increases the pace of inflation today. And third is raw material prices. Many raw materials used in the production of final goods and services are sold in markets where prices adjust sharply, even in the short run, which increases the production costs and leads to an eventual increase in product prices to cover the higher costs of production.
Okay. Next, I want to talk about the case in the textbook about the hyperinflation in Bolivia. It occurred between 1984 and 1985. Bolivia experienced this hyperinflation, and during this time, the long-term effects of money on price level occurred very quickly, and this. Oh yeah. Is it turned on now? Someone? I have both. Yeah. And this created a laboratory environment or condition for testing.
But if you drop it, it's like.
Oh yeah, this records.
No mind.
So like every time this records.
It's okay.
Every time you use like
Okay. Am I doing something wrong?
No, just I think it might be safer to clip it on.
Oh,
If you're gonna hold it, you can hold it, but just be careful with it.
the recording one, not the
Not the
microphone.
last one, because so it's streaming.
Oh, okay. I won't drop it.
Now I'm gonna make it drop it.
I feel like it's more dangerous quick.
Okay.
But I mean,
I'm sorry.
okay.
Are you okay to say that?
I think so.
Okay.
Alright. So I have a table in the next slide, but it shows how money supply, price level, and exchange rates move in step. And this exploding inflation causes real money demand to fall over time, resulting in money prices to rise even quicker than money supply. So I'm going to show the table. So as you can see, the price level started at 21, and by October, it ended at 12,411. This is like explosive inflation. And as you can see, due to the three factors that Emmy brought up, higher wages, inflationary expectations, and raw material prices, those played a part in the hyperinflation as well, especially the inflationary expectations, since it was such a rapid, sharp increase. And you can see how the money supply goes up in increments that are smaller than, say, the price level and exchange rate. But in late August, the government implemented some new policies to stop this inflation. So you can see it kind of levels out in the last 2 months, in September and October. But still, the currency is rendered worthless. And also the price level stops being sticky when hyperinflation comes into effect. So in the other graph, you can see how exchange rates are shooting up and down, and price level kind of stays right on the axis. But when hyperinflation comes in, it becomes less rigid, and it becomes just as volatile as exchange rates.
I would now like to examine the permanent increase in money supply and how that affects exchange rates. In my example, I assume that we are in the United States, so our domestic currency is dollars, and I examine the changes in the dollar-euro exchange rate. Okay, first of all, we'll look at the effects of the permanent money supply increase in the short run. Within the United States, the domestic market, the increase in nominal money supply will raise the real money supply, and as a result, this will lower the interest rates from R1 to R2. Now we look at the foreign exchange market. The fall in interest rates is equivalent to the reduction in the return on dollar deposits, which results in the leftward shift of this orange line right here, as you can see. This is actually a review of the presentation that we saw last class, but this is no longer the whole story, because the permanent increase in money supply has now changed exchange rate expectations. Because the US money supply increase is permanent, people expect long-run US price levels to rise. This is including exchange rates. And so people would expect a rise in the future dollar-euro exchange rate, which means that the dollar is less valuable when buying the euro, which is equivalent to the expected dollar depreciation against the euro. If you can recall back to chapter 14, this raises the expected dollar return on euro deposits. If you look at the graph above, that is the rightward shift of the green line, the expected euro return to the right. As a result, the dollar depreciates against the euro from 0.1 to 0.2. It is important to note here that the dollar depreciation is greater here than it would be if the expected dollar-euro exchange rate stayed fixed. If it had stayed fixed, the depreciation would have gone from 0.1 to 0.3. But it's very, very clear, compare that to 0.2, that the expected exchange rates had a significant effect on depreciating the dollar-euro exchange rate. Now we'll look at how the interest rates and exchange rates behave as the price levels rise during the economy's adjustment to its long-run equilibrium. Now, to review what long-run is, this is from the textbook, but the long-run equilibrium is the position the economy would eventually reach if no new economic shocks occurred during the time it took for the economy to reach full employment. Full employment, for your reference, is the condition where all people who are willing and able to work are employed. Now, let's see what happens. First, as price levels rise in proportion to the increase in money supply, real money supply decreases and returns to its initial level. Also, the equilibrium interest rate here returns back to its original level in the long run. This results in a slight appreciation of the dollar against the euro right there, from 2 to 4. Now, as you can see in the long run, the final equilibrium exchange rate there is higher than the original equilibrium point there. This shows that the permanent increase in money supply results in a proportional depreciation of the domestic currency. Keeping in mind, though, that there will be a drastic depreciation at first, followed by a slight appreciation in the long run. On the other hand, a permanent decrease in the money supply results in a proportional appreciation of the domestic currency. Once again, taking note that there will be a drastic appreciation followed by a slight depreciation.
So, as a summary from the last section, just where Claire explained, when the money supply rise, the exchange rate initially jumped from E1 to E2, and this is a depreciation greater than its long-run depreciation, E3. This phenomenon is called the exchange rate overshooting, and it is used when the immediate response to disturbance is greater than its response in the long run. And this exchange rate overshooting is important because it helps explain why the day-to-day exchange rate is so volatile. Under the interest parity condition, we assume that there will be no change in the dollar-euro exchange rate before the money supply changes. So, interest rate 1 in dollar equals interest rate in euro. At the same time, we could assume that the changes in the money supply brings immediate effects on interest rate. So increase in the US money supply causes the interest rate 1 to fall to interest rate 2, and that causes the interest rate of dollar to fall below the interest rate of euro. And because people change their expectation about the long run immediately after a change in money supply, there's an overshoot from the initial exchange rate to overshoot of exchange rate number 2, right here. And this phenomenon explains why the exchange rates are so volatile. It jumps from E1 to E2 before it slowly adjusts to the long run exchange rate of E3. So, overshooting is the direct consequences of the short run rigidity of the price level and the interest parity condition, because as shown here, it takes time for the price level to adjust to price level number 2. Therefore, it takes time for the exchange rate to adjust as well. That's the end of our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
discussion is something that, when you really start to think it through, is a little complicated. So we'll come back to this for sure, like everything. But first, let's follow up on, well, it's all the same topic, same chapter. But the group that presented before this, we had an article related to this little part that they presented. And we didn't do a discussion of that yet. And I thought today, instead of just putting you in the groups of where you're sitting, why don't we try to mix up groups a little bit more? So I will number you are. Remember your number, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Excited about this? 2. Okay, 3. When is this going to be? Okay, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Okay, so let's have the number ones go with Mal, maybe up here or somewhere where he is. Try to sit so you can all see each other. The 2s will go with Alyssa, maybe back there. The 3s with Christina. Do I have your name right? Carolina. Back there. And the 4s with Johan up here. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're doing Revolution in the Air. If some of you forgot to bring it, I have a few extra copies. I'll put the extra copies up here. Where's one?